Hey guys, LevelCap here. Today I want to talk about a subject which is very popular among gamers, and that is what kind of hardware are you gaming with? Whether or not it's a gaming controller for your console, mouse and keyboard for your PC, headsets, microphones, monitors, graphics cards, CPUs, all that kind of stuff. People love talking about it because there is a pretty big impact that hardware can or can't have on gaming, and I want to sort of get to the bottom of some of this and talk about specific areas of gaming where hardware has a huge impact, and then other areas where people might end up spending a lot of money on hardware upgrades that really doesn't give them a huge advantage over other players. The first thing I want to delve into is sound, and this pertains to both PC gaming and console gaming. What kind of headset you're running? Are you using a surround sound system? Do you have earbuds? How is that actually going to affect your competitiveness in first-person shooters or competitive gaming in general? And sound is really one of those things that you could think you have an amazing sound system until you hear one better. It's sort of like a paradigm shift every time you hear a new sound system that's just way better. You can't actually imagine how much better or more accurate your sound can be until you hear the new system. So you might think you've got a great set of gaming headphones, but perhaps you don't. Maybe you've got a set that's really comfortable, maybe music sounds good on them, but maybe they're really bad for games. Now personally, I've used crappy stereo desktop speakers built into monitors. I've used nice surround sound speakers with a subwoofer. I've used multiple kinds of headphones, from earbuds to cheap little $15 headphones that I got at Radio Shack to expensive $100 headphones, and then even more beyond that, all for gaming purposes. So I feel like I have a pretty good insight into what is going to get you the best situational awareness for your dollar, and I think headphones are probably one of the cheapest areas to upgrade your hardware that's going to make the biggest impact on your actual gaming. So after trying out all these different systems, I gotta say that having speakers in a surround sound setup that are positioned perfectly around you and set up with the distancing correct will give you the absolute most accurate directional sound, and there's just nothing that can really compare with satellite speakers around you. 7.1 system, 5.1 system, those will give you more situational awareness than a set of headphones, no matter how good those headphones are. That being said, most people who are gaming just can't really realistically use a surround sound system like that, or if you're playing competitively, you're often talking with people. If you're using speakers, it's going to pick up on the mic and just be annoying. Most gamers, hardcore gamers, play with headphones. And frankly, most headphones can replicate surround sound to a quality that is almost on the level with the speaker system. They're also going to save you money and save you a lot of space and wiring time. Now, I want to move on to other pieces of hardware, but I have to say that if you are looking for getting some gaming headphones that are just going to give you absolutely amazing positional accuracy, check out my review on the Audio-Technica AD700s. Those things are just amazingly good. They are $100 headphones. They're a little bit pricey, but for the amount of money that you're spending on a sound system, it is just unbelievable, and it will give you a huge advantage in gaming. If you can't afford that much, you can get some of the lower end gaming headphones that Razer or SteelSeries makes, but I gotta say that they are not going to come close to the kind of positional accuracy that you can get from some headphones that are actually made for sound monitoring as opposed to gaming. To conclude my thoughts on the sound aspect of gaming, I think it's one of the lesser expensive and more impactful areas to upgrade. So if you've got a bad sound system for gaming and you're thinking about upgrading your mouse or your keyboard or getting a better controller or something, look at your headphones first. That will make a huge impact. Now I want to talk about frames per second, the amount of frames that you see on your screen every second while you're playing a video game. Sorry console guys, this doesn't really apply to you as much because your frame rate is pretty much locked in by your console hardware. PCs, on the other hand, we have the option to modify our hardware, change graphics settings, change resolutions to modify our frame rate and try to get better frames per second. Now, every now and then somebody will tell you something like the human eye can't see more than 30 frames per second, or you never need more than 60 frames a second for gaming. That's pretty much the best it'll ever need to be. And let me just say, those things are not true. I've been gaming for a long time before LCD liquid crystal displays came out. back on my big ol' CRT 17-inch, 19-inch monitors, and those things refreshed at a refresh rate of 120 hertz. They would refresh even faster sometimes, and you could run at frame rates beyond 100 frames per second, and you could really tell the difference between 60 and 100 and 120 frames per second. And I got quite used to the difference in how it looked, and let me tell you, you can absolutely tell the difference, and it will make a pretty big difference on how you play a game. Now, before I get into the really expensive aspects of upgrading your PC for the ultimate gaming experience, let me just say that there's a lot of economical ways to get a really nice, smooth gaming experience. 60 frames per second is completely adequate to game on, and a lot of people, if you don't have a lot of money to spend on expensive monitors and graphics cards, then I would recommend definitely just shooting for 60 frames per second. That will improve your gaming. Now, why am I saying 60 frames per second and not 54 or 70 or some other arbitrary number? Well, 60 frames per second is the most frames you're going to be able to see per second on a standard LCD monitor. They refresh at 60 hertz, and you're not going to be able to see more than 60 images per second on that monitor. So it doesn't matter if your computer's capable of rendering a game at 100 frames per second, your monitor will not display it at beyond 60 frames per second. Now, if you're not quite hitting that 60 frames per second mark, and there's a few ways to test this out if you're not sure what your frame rate is, often there's console commands in your game, or you can download a program like Fraps, which will tell you what your frame rate is while you're gaming. But if you're not hitting that benchmark, then I would recommend first lowering your graphics settings before spending money on tons of expensive hardware. You can even change your resolution. Gaming at 1280 by 720 is a really good way to save some frames, turning off anti-aliasing, turning off advanced shadows. Most games have those kind of options there. You basically want to get your game to the point where you're getting 60 frames per second. It's going to give you a huge advantage over anything lower than that. Now, maybe you've already got a pretty decent PC, you're hitting that 60 frame rate mark there, and you want to take it beyond that. There is definitely performance improvements beyond 60 frames per second. Now, they're not going to be quite as drastic as the difference between 30 and 60 frames per second. The difference between 60 and 90 is substantial for a top-end gamer, but if you don't have a lot of money to spend, I wouldn't worry too much about trying to push beyond 60 frames per second. The first upgrade you'd need to even see frames beyond 60 per second is a monitor that can refresh at 120 hertz. Now, there are some LCDs that do refresh at 120 hertz that are made for gaming. BenQ is a good one. I own a BenQ monitor that refreshes at 120 hertz, and it allows me to see really fast frame rate. Then you need hardware to actually upgrade and see more frames, upgrading to SLI, upgrading your GPU and CPU. These are all really expensive upgrades, but if you are a hardcore gamer, you will see some performance improvements by upgrading to 90 frames per second or even 100 frames per second. It will make the gameplay feel much smoother, more fluid. And think about this, if you turn around really fast, there's only so many frames that are going to display your turn. You could literally miss somebody when you're making a quick turnaround where you would actually see them if you're gaming at higher frames per second. So there is mathematical, statistical advantages of having higher frame rate, not just the smoothness of gaming, but you will see more, you will be able to pick up much more detail in your environment. So frame rate, shoot for 60 frames per second. If you're an extremist, an enthusiast, and you want to go for beyond 60, it's going to cost you a pretty penny, but it will be worth it if you are a hardcore gamer. Now, I want to talk about gaming peripherals, and I saved these for last because they have varying degrees of how much they improve your gaming. Some of them are very minor, some of them are more comfort upgrades than performance upgrades, but nonetheless they are an important aspect of gaming and improving your gaming. How about the controller and mouse and keyboard that you use for gaming? I've heard a lot of good things about some of the upgradable controllers that you can get for PlayStation and Xbox, and I'm sure they do make really big improvements. One of the biggest improvements I've noticed from switching to a Razer mouse from a Logitech mouse that I used to use was that the clicking distance for my left click or my right click distance was less, and the pressure was less that I needed to apply to it. This allowed me to click a lot faster when I needed to fire, say, a semi-automatic weapon like a pistol. The same mechanic is applied to some of the high-end controllers out there where they put a little stopper in on the trigger, making the distance less that you can pull the trigger in before you can pull it again, so you can pull the trigger faster. Gaming keyboards are very much the same. I'm using a Razer Black Widow Tournament Edition keyboard, and the distance that I have to press down on the keys seems less than a normal keyboard. So you can actually get faster reaction time if you need to say strafe left and then strafe right. I will say that the keyboard upgrade seems to be a much smaller impact than the mouse upgrade. One nice thing about the Tournament Edition keyboards or shorter keyboards is that you can have your movement hand, your left hand and your right hand, depending on how you're handed, closer together, and they can be in a much more ergonomic position that just feels a little bit more comfortable. Another thing that people ask me about a lot is an armrest that occasionally shows up in my videos, and this is a Ergo Rest that I got on Amazon. It was a little pricey, it was about $80 I think, but what this armrest does is it allows my arm to move freely, but whenever I come to a gaming session or I come over to my desk, I always put my arm in the exact same position. This is great for muscle memory. Console players don't really have this issue because you always have your hand on your controller pretty much in the same position, but with gaming on a PC, often you have a desk or a chair that moves around in relation to your keyboard and mouse, and having those armrests on your chair often put your arms in different positions. So you really want to retain that muscle memory by keeping your arms in pretty much the same position that you're used to. So that's why the armrest was actually a really big improvement for me. Again, these upgrades are minor compared to some of the other performance upgrades of, say, having a good audio system or more frame rates, but still, again, if you're an enthusiast, these upgrades will be worth it in the long run. Now, there's many other smaller bits of hardware that I could talk about, like mouse pads, mouse bungees, a stand-up desk so you can stand while you're gaming, gaming glasses, do they help? But I think I've already covered the main aspects that are going to improve your game, and I hope this gives you guys an idea of what might be worthwhile upgrades for your computer, especially if you don't have the money to spend, where to start off with your upgrades if you really do want to try and get an edge hardware-wise over your opponents. They do make a pretty big difference. The better you get at gaming, the bigger difference you'll notice between upgrading to nicer performance hardware. So thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to link all the hardware in the video description in case you had any questions about the specific ones I was talking about. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap signing off.